Good morning and welcome to Jetlore's ongoing webinar series. I am your host this morning, Stephanie Call, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our webinar this morning on how to be a savvy email marketer. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started here this morning. All the lines are on mute, so raise your hand or send me a chat message should you need us. Feel free to ask questions at any time in the Q&A box. All questions will be answered either live during the webinar or via email after the event. And don't forget to leave us feedback. Let us know how we can improve and make this more educational and, frankly, more fun. I'm super excited to announce this morning's speakers for becoming a savvy email marketer. I get the pleasure of working with these guys every day, and believe me, they have some incredible knowledge that they're going to share with you this morning. First, I'd like to introduce Dave Warshan, our Senior Director of Sales. Dave, good morning.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Dave is joining us all the way from Boulder area in Colorado, Dave?
Yeah, Denver area. Yep.
Yep. Awesome. And we also have David Sneese on the line, our Director of Customer Success. David is a wicked good ping pong player, just FYI. Good morning, David. Welcome.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
So the two Daves this morning are going to talk to you about how to become an even savvier email marketer. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Dave Orshan. Dave?
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us this morning. I appreciate getting the opportunity to chat with you, as does David, I'm sure. So really briefly, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Jetlore. I hope most of you, but we're a really interesting, really cutting edge software as a service platform as a service company. And we have developed subject matter expertise through our customer data platform capabilities with some of the biggest retailers out there and some of the biggest brands out there. You can see a smattering of our clients on the right side of the slide there, but part of our focus is really trying to dig into where we can drive value within both e-commerce experiences, within things that are, again, commerce related, like travel experiences, marketplaces, flash sales, you name it. But today, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about where we can really help you guys drive value and understand kind of what the state of the art is as it pertains to email marketing. And so when we think about what those steps are to become a really savvy email marketer, I think that we've broken it down into something that's, I think, pretty straightforward. So, Steph, would you mind advancing us here? Yeah. So in terms of what we think are really the important things to cover today, what we want to go through is the idea of not only discussing, but then frankly emphasizing the importance of email as a communication channel. Even in 2017 here, email is frankly more important than it's ever been. The next piece that we'll talk about here is also going into how you can think about building or augmenting your existing email programs into being a high converting email program. And then the last step that we're going to talk about here is thinking about how you can revitalize your email programs through next generation technology, through relevant content, et cetera, and talk about what's kind of at your disposal or what we see as state of the art. So to start here, let's talk about emphasizing the importance, frankly, because this is something that we all have to be aware of here. I mean, email has changed a lot over time. Of course, we're 40 years of email here now. But the idea is that in terms of where we've gotten to, for the past 5 to 10 years, segmentation has been critical within email. Everybody's been targeting how to better segment, how to better target, et cetera. But where we're at today, and we see this as a really interesting inflection point, we think, for a lot of email programs. We see AI and automation and individualization and personalization, whatever you want to call those different concepts, as being critical, and absolutely the direction that email marketing is for many folks, where a lot of folks are headed. And so on that note, as we progress through our hour here, I'd love to ask you and get your thoughts or questions or ideas at the end of the hour here about where are you in your programs? Do you feel like you're embracing the idea of individualization and personalization? Are you still focused on segmentation? Are you not even there because you're just trying to get emails out the door? We'd love to hear from you, and definitely, hopefully, we can find some time at the end of the hour here to talk about that. So when we look at email in 2017 here, I think it's really critical to acknowledge that, frankly, email still drives 20% of the online retail industry. We are seeing just amazing returns from good emails. Even bad emails can get you returns, but good emails do so much better. A quick, fun statistic. We saw that in Q2 in 2017 of this year, just in the US alone, that email was responsible for generating over $105 billion in revenue. And it was 16% higher than it was previously in 2016. That's a US Commerce Department stat. So when we think about how important email is, it's still a primary communication channel. In fact, it may be the primary communication channel for many of your businesses. And the ROI is still huge. And frankly, with the better tools at your disposal, it's getting even better. 70% of consumers still choose email as a preferred channel for promotional messages. And that's not just like older demographics or anything like that. Even millennials love email. So there's a huge amount of folks out there who are really still focused on the idea of being able to get good emails and engaging with you when you can send a good email. And then when 90% of your email is still actually getting in front of the consumer, when we can contrast it against social and social channels, it's still the ability to connect is right there. So David, any thoughts on this? Anything that you think would be important to talk about here?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. What I want to really go into now is the different types of emails that we have out there. So first off, promotional email, you all know this very well. It's the bread and butter and the best way to keep consistent engagement with active customers, as well as to wake dormant customers. To what you were saying, Dave, the key to promotional is the trends that we're seeing. And this is moving away from that one size fits all segment based toward more of an automated artificial intelligence where possible powered the bulk of the email. So powering the bulk of the email. And where needed, that we might layer in some hand curation, merchandising, and promotional content. So that's what we're seeing in promotional email. I think we all know this well. We also have the customer lifecycle emails. So this is your welcome emails, anniversary, birthday, welcome series. What we're seeing around these is they are key to establishing the initial relationship, the ongoing reputation that you have that a brand has with their customers. And as important as in these as revenue is, more so even as the ability to just engage with your consumers and continue to collect new data points on them and keep them warm. And then the last type is the trigger emails. So in browse abandon, shopping cart abandon, this is low funnel, high explicit interest. It's essential in these cases to recommend very related content. And what we're seeing now is consumers are too smart to respond to triggered discounts. So that's where we're seeing content, additional items you might be interested in, additional things that would interest you in these types of emails. Post-purchase triggers is a very strong area we're seeing right now for driving new revenue. So we find that in the first couple engagements post-purchase, you should have those complementary products, things that are typically purchased with, and in some cases similar products depending on the type of product that someone has purchased. And then in future engagement, it should be much more oriented around knowing the entire user profile. So we do have some email examples, mostly of promotional emails, as we just mentioned, that we wanted to we've seen the spectrum from good to bad. And so we'll start off with the bad. So this example that we see here, Macy's, what we're seeing in this case is there's not always the concept of thinking long-term when putting out blast emails. So what in this case is there's a subject line that is everything that you see on the screen here, the extra 25%. So you're being very repetitive with the content that you see here. You have a promotional banner that takes up almost everything that you see, really too large a part of the email that you see here. Dave, any other thoughts on improvements we could make in this example?
Well, I think one of the most important things that you could do is, while also, of course, thinking about how to refactor that banner, but also show something that's relevant to the individual above the fold, right? Whether that's relevant product, relevant content, something that's important, that's a real call to action that isn't just that one size fits all. Even in blast emails, I think it's entirely possible to execute on that sort of strategy.
Yeah, thanks. And so for Macy's, we're going to give this one D. Next example is Sports Authority. So in this case, actually, the subject line was just for you. And so that's just something that we found is a very big turn off to customers. If you say, I've curated this content for you, it's just for you. And then if you look at this content, you have men's, women's, children's, you have all sorts of content. And all it is there's that call to action that it's just for you. That draw, but when you experience it, you know that it's not actually just for you. So as a consumer you feel lied to, this we've seen out in the marketplace is an unsubscribe nightmare. You shouldn't actually call that out unless that's something you're going to actually do. So in this case, we give Sports Authority a C-. Moving on is a target email. So I do like there's a good mix of content in this screen, very much above the fold. It's a strong message, and you're showing what we recommend is specific content that someone's going to click on. They're going to land very low in the funnel if we know a lot about them, which is what you see here, as well as promotional content and categorical content. If we don't know explicitly what they're interested in and searching for recently, it should initiate and elicit some type of reaction. So we've got a good mix of content that should get someone at least to the site, if not purchasing what we're displaying here. So we give target, in this case, a B-, and that leaves us with eBay, which is our favorite. So what we see with eBay, you have a very wide variety of content similar to what we were talking about with Target. And then what I really like about this is it's clean and it has a call to action. So we have a sense of urgency. They actually have a countdown at the top. And then there are calls to action throughout the email and different types of content. So specific products you see at the very top, things that you are probably interested in because we know about you. And then as you come down, it's higher in the funnel. You see watches rather than a specific watch or specific content that we see higher up in the funnel. Dave, any other thoughts on this one?
Sorry about that, was on mute. You know, I think that this is a really good example of like how you can put together clean marketing, even in a promotional email, that's still pushing something that's relevant and interesting above the fold. And of course, leveraging technologies to be able to do that. Relevant content, relevant product is absolutely critical to moving forward. And if you can connect directly with that individual, in my opinion, I think that's a home run.
So A+ on this one in our book.
Cool. So transitioning a little bit here, right? We've talked about some of those initial building blocks and, you know, emphasizing that, frankly, the email is still really critical. But then as we transition over here to talking about how do you either build or augment a high converting email program, there's a lot of things at your disposal that you should be aware of, right? And again, coming back to the savvy email marketer concept, collecting data and then, of course, using data, which is something we'll get into in a moment here, is really critical. But the collection of the data, we think it falls into sort of two different categories. So of course there's explicit data, right? When you manage to get engaged with an individual, whether they be a prospect, a customer, et cetera, and the idea of being able to collect that explicit data, well, of course we all try and do that. Some organizations collect more explicit data than others. You know, when I go to sign up on certain sites, or when I go to sign up during an email program sign up, often it's just, hey, what's your email address, right? And then there's nothing more than that. Sometimes there's asking for more, and sometimes it can even be preferences and things like that. But on the flip side of things, what we, of course, all see far more of is implicit data that's being collected. Things like browse behaviors, clicks on emails. And there's a really, really deep level of nuance that goes into both what the implicit data might be that you're collecting, and then, of course, what you're going to do with it. Being able to monitor that and track that and then be able to take action on it, I think, is the critical piece that as a savvy email marketer, you should be emphasizing in your organizations. Because for as much as you might be able to collect it, if you can't take action on it, what's the point? So these are a lot of the really, really contemporary factors I think a lot of folks are thinking about here. And then moreover, when you think about how to use it or what to do with it, we get into the build versus buy conversation. And I think, David, you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so, you know, the classic build versus buy that comes into case here when you're choosing how to build up your email program and considering bringing in external resources, vendors like a Jetlore, this is the age-old question. And so what we see is, yes, this is often the question, but more likely or more specifically, it's how much to build, how much to buy, and all too often how much to scrap as well. And then maybe there's a middle ground in there is what a lot of our customers see. So, for example, there are segmentation tools all along the spectrum of maturity out there. Some can be very strong functionally, and the question you need to ask is, if you're going to use these tools, if you're going to purchase these tools, if you're going to go forward with them, if you have them today, they need to be able to be left alone. They need to be set it and forget it. They cannot be too rigid or they fail eventually. Maybe they won't at first. Maybe they will succeed and there'll be an increase in revenue until we have turnover in the organization and those people that are maintaining rules are no longer with the organization, and then these fail and we get put in a bad place. So that's what we see is it's very important when making these decisions. The strategy I see best is to spread the value and the work among people and among tools. And so you might have more of a hybrid approach. Specifically, we suggest let the tools do the busy, repetitive work and let people be more strategic, so that when changes are made in the organization, it's the strategic parts that we're replacing rather than the repetitive parts that we need to retrain people on. So from a hybrid perspective, you see this is kind of our suggestion is, the build, as we all know, that takes a lot more time. It can have a lot of value, but the buy and the hybrid perspective, when you're bringing in external approaches, you get the best practices of those approaches. We do think that there's some value in having internal resources that can take advantage of the data that you have, and potentially that's what one of the suggestions we have around purchasing a vendor is getting a vendor that will give you data back in order to build yourself, so that you can take this hybrid approach so that you're not locked into any one or two or three vendors. So on this perspective, you have a few decisions to make, a few types of vendors that you might go with. The first one that we all know very well, ESPs. These are essentially the engine that deliver your message. Any ESP selected today should be able to upload and update lists of contacts, do personalization and other kind of variable substitution, and they should be reputable and testable from a deliverability, display on mobile device perspective. I think that's the bread and butter. Any ESP that you select today should have that. Our recommendation that what we've seen with our customers is when choosing an ESP, it's important to think about the expertise that you have internally. So if you don't have a lot of HTML experience, you want an ESP that offers user-friendly, customizable templates, drag and drop type of modes for those organizations with light coding and light design skills. And then we have the CRMs. So the CRMs, they are a system of record for a business to keep track of targets, of consumers, as well as your detailed record of purchase history and user actions and complaints and the like. So these are CRMs have traditionally been built for B2B businesses, as we know. So what we're finding is that these CRMs are often too rigid. They're not tailored to that B2C one-to-one user experience, where marketers are now finding that these CRMs are not tailored to what they need. And so they're looking to more of customer data platforms. And I know, Dave, you've got a lot of experience in this, so I'll kind of let you speak to those CDPs that we're seeing in the market more and more now.
Sure. Well, it's definitely a hot topic, the idea of what a customer data platform can ultimately mean, especially for the email marketer. Consolidation of data is kind of the promise of what a CDP offers, and then making that data available again out to different systems. We also have a perspective on this where we also think a customer data platform should actually do more than that. We'll get into that in a moment. But when we're talking about vendor strategy, of course, everybody's always had to make decisions around whether or not they should be using an ESP, whether they should be sending an email internally or both, right? And of course, CRMs have been a function of that discussion now. But as we begin to think about, again, being savvy about where you're taking your programs in 2018 and beyond, elements like customer data platforms that offer more capabilities, more finite data at the user level, and then the ability, we think, to be able to take action on it is absolutely critical to be, kind of keep in perspective as well.
Yeah, so there are, now that we kind of have some of this groundwork, there are ways that you need to look at your email program to measure the success of it. And so variety of ways to do this, but to get a basic idea, I think it's simplest to look at the 4 steps of the sales purchase funnel. We all know this well, but this is what our customers do. So from a deliverability perspective, This is on and off a hot topic. I think we talked about the evolution of the email marketing program and how we had, spam filters and a lot of regulation in the early 2000s. So most people are good at this. I'd say different customers have different challenges. Very reputable brands using reputable ESPs typically do not have challenges, though I have seen some major brands, some of our larger customers with issues out there. So it's important to kind of constantly keep your eye on this and hold your ESP accountable around best practices, as well as your other vendors that can influence this. For example, my team, we often work with customers to ensure that there's a proper distribution of text and images as you move towards artificial intelligence. There are more images and less text because that information is not explicitly available at the time of send. So as you move towards artificial intelligence, and other types of vendors need to think about some of those best practices out there. So I would say hold your vendors and your team members accountable to this on a constant basis, because you have one snafu and it can really screw things up. So from an open rate perspective, important to have very good subject lines. I think subject lines we have found are worth their weight in gold. And we work with our customers a lot on determining what is the best approach around those. And then click to open rate. So once opened, are users properly engaging with the content? So it's a key metric for an email marketer, but it shouldn't just be click to open rate or conversion rate. There's usually a balance of these two. So I see that I have some customers that will strictly measure the performance of their email program on the click to open rate. So what they care about is that the email program is getting you to the site. That works for some brands, some types of content, not for others. I typically recommend a balance of these two goals around click to open rate as well as conversion rate. And when taking these into consideration, you need to, this goes back to our examples of good and bad, you need to balance out the content that you display in order to balance out what you're trying to accomplish out of the email program. So you want low funnel items if you have explicit interest from your consumers, so that consumers will purchase based on what they see in email. But you also want to mix in some high funnel items like promotions or catalogs, maybe not necessarily specific products, so that we don't know exactly what a consumer might want to engage with, but we can get them to the site in order to engage from there. Those types of items will have higher click to open rate and lower purchase rate. So it's really finding the proper balance between these two. And then from a testing and automating perspective, so testing, it's essential to any email program. The problem that we typically encounter with it, two problems. One is it's not informative unless tests are very isolated. So two groups, if you're testing two different groups, they need to be nearly identical with really one variation, because there are so often more influencers than meet the eye. So really any test should have one variation to be tested. And then splits is the second thing. So biggest challenge among our customers is finding those proper splits. Our best practices is to carefully design user splits based upon how recent and how frequent they have purchased items. We work with our customers to design those splits. Sometimes with larger organizations, random splits work fine when you have very large lists, but I have seen those go sour as well. So the best practice that we find is to, at a bare minimum, do a dry run, reach statistical significance, where you're sending the same content to two groups of users, you know that they have similar performance, and then to do the testing on those two different users. So now with some of the groundwork for building out your marketing program laid out, I'll turn it back over to Dave to talk about some of the ways we are seeing the industry bringing value to customers with technology.
Thanks, David. We're in a state of change, right? And there's a lot of folks who are evaluating their programs and saying, well, okay, now that I know that I've got the building blocks in place, or I'm still trying to overcome some of these other challenges, what is out there to be able to truly be able to, frankly, deliver a more relevant experience to my individuals who are receiving these emails? What kind of technology can I use? And so, of course, we have a perspective on that. So first and foremost, I think that we need to acknowledge that one size does not fit all. And so as we begin to think about how to move forward, emails like the gold box emails, we can't think about a one-size-fits-all program moving forward. The tools are finally at your disposal where you don't have to have static content, static generic copy, et cetera, whether it's subject lines and so forth. You can use specific content through automation, through the automated decisioning, to be able to get the right thing in front of the right person at the right time. And we can't make the mistakes that we've made in the past as well, showing, for example, in transactional emails, the same product to somebody that they've just bought. These types of things don't drive value within the relationship between you and the consumer. And frankly, consumers look at it and they're pretty cynical and they're like, oh, they don't know who I am. They're not even paying attention to what I just did, right? And so again, in follow-up emails, like the third email on this slide here is absolutely an offender in this concept, because again, they're showing the same things again. We don't have to do this anymore. One size does not fit all. We don't have to think about also one size fits many. The idea of being able to actually leverage data, some of that explicit and implicit data that we've had beyond those segments we've talked about in the past, and really driving a one-to-one message is absolutely the direction that, frankly, virtually all verticals that leverage email marketing are headed in. And so if we can embrace collectively that, as an email marketer, your role is becoming more strategic and that you're getting more influence, in fact, within your organization. And when leveraging some of these tools, like things that Jetlore offers and so forth, that allow you to be able to automate more and make more strategic decisions, it makes you more strategic as a resource to your business, but of course also improves the quality of the relationship that you're establishing with your clients. So part of what we think is really important to look at here is that Jetlore, for example, uses data in a pretty unique way, and that is something else we would submit that you should be considering looking at as well. So instead of some of the more traditional CRM type data pieces, these explicit data pieces that we're seeing at the top here on the slide with Mary and her name and so on, and then some of the more implicit data that you see below, where it's like her opens and clicks and so on, what we feel are the only way to be able to make sense of product, make sense of content, and be able to drive that one-to-one relationship is actually by taking AI and looking at the content and the product that you have at your disposal and be able to extract attributes of the content and of the product. And then, and this is the critical piece for us, in real time, as your consumer engages with you, not just at email send, but at email open, being able to say, well, what are the attributes that matter most to Mary? And allow for automation to take over and automate portions or a significant component of your email campaigns to be able to frankly select the content or the product as it relates in this case to Mary, and the attributes that matter most to her about those product or content. This is a change. As it relates to where we think things are heading, from a customer data platform perspective, Jetlore has a pretty unique perspective. We all want to track user behavior across your channels and be able to leverage that within an email context. But the difference here is that when we think about how Jetlore sees the customer data platform concept as being critical kind of moving forward with email marketing especially, you should also be able to get out of your data platform, your customer data platform, the idea that that platform should be able to describe the user preferences and affinities in terms of your own content, right? Well, of course, you want to ingest your own content then into that same data platform, and then be able to leverage that content to personalize to the individual user. So in order to do that, though, a customer data platform also needs to be able to use and understand your content. And so ultimately what you can derive from that are insights about your customers in your own language, and of course, be able to automate that or leverage it within your email marketing channels. And then ultimately, also having a customer data platform in this manner within your ecosystem is going to allow you to both take in third-party data or your own multi-channel data, omni-channel data, and then be able to go use that data elsewhere, not just within your email programs, but elsewhere in your enterprise. And so especially as email marketers are looking ahead here, we feel that keeping the customer data platform concept front and center as likely a necessity, frankly, and augmentative beyond your ESP selections, beyond your CRM selections, and be able to think about that within the context of how that's going to augment your programs moving forward is just critical. So Jetlore itself, a little bit about us, we take in just as we've described, into our real-time customer data platform, things like all these different implicit data pieces, historical purchases, we can look at your new products or new content and so forth. We can take all manner of data and then ultimately be able to help you drive in your email channels a true one-to-one experience. And so even within the concept of the same template, if you're sending out a campaign with a design, the content can be bespoke and individualized to the person who's actually opening that. David, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think this just goes back to what we were talking about varying the content that you get to users. So in this case, we've got a wireframe that we've set up, and we want to show collections or promotions and then products that might relate to that. More collections, more promotions, sub-catalogs, maybe open set of products. So this is what we found is most effective among our customers is have good data. I think that's very important that you have the data, that you have the data structured so that you can support this type of layout. So, when I talk about subcatalogs or promotions, you want to have enough data so that you can personalize, so that you have promotions that might be relevant to a various set of users. And then to set this up and to determine what can we automate, what can we set and forget, and what do we want to be strategic about what we set up in an email. So maybe the promotional content, maybe the specific blogs that we want to dedicate resources to, because that's how people engage with us best. So just to determine based on our business and our brand, what can we automate and what can we have a tool take care of versus what do we want our marketers to dedicate and be strategic about. So we've talked through the various steps as mentioned. I think what to me, the calls to action from this are, when we're talking about how important email is as a communication channel, those stats that Dave gave you, it's sometimes gets forgotten and set aside. My best recommendation is to dedicate strategic resources to email. I so often see you put very junior people on email. They have to learn on the fly. And they're not necessarily thinking about the long term and how can we make these tools and the setup and the layouts that we have reusable and bringing value to our customers. So I think that's essential, is dedicating strategic resources to email and stressing the importance of email within your organization. And then, building that high converting email program, bringing the value. I think it's, as we talked about, it's selecting vendors that enable you in the long term and are not just about that initial kind of lift in revenue in the short term. They enable you to have repeatable processes when there's turnover in the organization. Your processes are going to stay in place, and they also give you the data back so that you can do the things that we talked about from a customer data platform perspective. You can get your engineering involved. It's not just a marketer's role from an email program perspective. And then obviously using data to get the most relevant content to your users, whether that's through an external vendor or that's something that you do internally with your organization. I think that's the key of everything that we've talked about today, is get that relevant content to the users in order to have a successful email program. So we talked about the journey that we've been along here. I think from getting in recent days from segmentation to smarter segmentation, to moving away from segmentation towards artificial intelligence and personalization. So I know there's kind of a spectrum that we're all along here. All of my customers are somewhere along this spectrum. So one thing we'll ask from you is just send in a chat. Let us know where you think you are, maybe any questions that you have along this, and we can get a report out of findings, and you can see kind of your path along this journey relative to some of your peers as well. So we'll give a moment for that.
Guys, I thought you did an amazing job. Those of you in attendance, let's give them a proverbial round of applause here. I love that even though I work at Jetlore every day, I learned a lot in this webinar. And so, I guess in my next career, maybe I can be a savvy email marketer. I'm all set. We did get some questions through the course of this webinar. So guys, you can fight amongst yourselves as to who's going to answer them. But the first question is, you guys mentioned a balance should be struck between click to open open rates, and purchase rates. How would you suggest doing this in practical terms?
Yeah, so I think we talked about various types of content. So content that's low in the funnel versus content that's high in the funnel. So in promotional email, specifically, customers are often very high in the funnel. So what you want to do is not only vary the types of content that consumers see, but also have those. I think we saw it like in the eBay. Have calls to action, have a sense of urgency, and then have the ability to balance out very specific purchasable content if we know about consumers, with the ability also to have much more generic content that will get a broad set of consumers if we don't know a lot of data about them. So I think it's just that balance within your each specific email and across emails as well, that you balance out the type of the content that you're displaying to a user to bring that value to them.
So we got an interesting question, kind of more AI related. So the question is, when giving up control from manually selecting content to AI selected content, they're concerned that they could have some negative consumer experiences. How do you suggest planning for this, preventing, testing for this, et cetera? I think that the loss of control here is a concern.
Yeah, no, it's a valid concern. I'd say probably the most important element is quality of data. So in moving towards artificial intelligence, you're going to expose more of your catalog to your user base than ever before. So you want to have both internal, I'd say, resources as well as external resources if you're working with a vendor to kind of brush through the catalog and look for any issues or red flags. And I'd say I recently had a customer in apparel that had a product feed with all white images. And so when they started to use Jetlore to display content, everything was white. And so what we suggest doing is not only brush through this in the integration phase, but if you have good testing, so various real users test messages to various users, some with significant activity and some with very near empty profiles, you'll catch this type of data. It's always recommended to do the testing and then additionally, all of the as a part of an integration process that you have internal and external resources that are looking through these potential issues. But it all comes back to data quality. So my suggestion is that you involve more than just an email marketer, and that you involve merchandising and you involve the people that are involved in the various elements of the data and the products that you have themselves as well.
Excellent.
Stephanie, if you don't mind, one thing I'd like to submit on that as well is, frankly, data quality affects everybody in your organization, right? But I think the other thing to we can all raise our hand and admit is that everybody has this problem. Data quality is something that everybody is challenged by. So especially I think as we work with our clients here, and David's team is, I think, a great example of that. David's team is very good about being consultative about how to think about what these problems are, how to solve for these issues, what are some opportunities to look at in terms of how to work around that. And of course, Jetlore inherently, based on our attribute-based approach, can help with those types of aspects as well, because we can extract data where you maybe don't have explicit attributes associated with things. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to attack that problem, but you're not alone in trying to solve for that if that's one of the challenges on your plate today.
Perfect. So, we talked a little bit about explicit versus implicit data. And one of the questions we received was, should I ask my users for more detailed information about themselves? Like, for example, their preferences, when, et cetera. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, no, Dave, I know you provided some thoughts on this. I would just, specifically from a customer perspective, I think it definitely varies by customer. Certainly we work with companies, I work with a company that sells wine, and a big trend in that business and that industry is to ask very specific questions about what are your tastes. So I think that this can, in the right environment, perform well for acquiring customers, to let them know that you're interested in them and to collect data so that you can get content out to them. What I've found is it's good to ask again in the future and have opportunities for them to do discovery of new types of products. So I think we have a number of customers that have in their profile, there's an interest section. sometimes an interrogation is too much, especially initially. That can be a barrier. So I think the ability to have an interest section where people can capture that data, you can get that explicit data from them. But what I would warn against is I think as Dave mentioned, if you have a good ability to capture that implicit data, you can learn the preferences in time. We don't pigeonhole these people into specific segments, and really a good platform for tracking of consumer data should be able to not only pick up content for display from the data itself, but also kind of feed that data back. So I think it's a business decision based upon your business, whether you want to capture this explicitly up front or throughout the process. But I would warn against kind of having that interrogation as a part of the onboarding process in most environments.
Excellent. And then,
Stephanie,
sorry, Dave.
Yeah, just continue thoughts there. Back to the one size does not fit all concept. I mean, folks are very much in transient cohorts, right? People, the way that they engage with you may be very different on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. And so I think it's important to acknowledge and embrace the idea that with the right tools at your disposal, with the right products like SaaS products and vendors and internal strategies and so forth, you can embrace that. And it doesn't have to be, oh, this person got segmented to this segment 18 months ago. And through, be able to look at the types of the attribute data that we build user level profiles around in real time. I know that there's a path to be able to have a level of subtlety and value that you can deliver to the individual, especially over time, especially as their interests evolve over time. So that's definitely something that's viable.
Right. And this, our last question is, on that CDP slide, the one with the wireframe, this attendee wants to know, does Jetlore fill in those wireframe slots automatically for all those products and collections? Because they're concerned that to do that for, do a 1-to-1 ratio, that would be a tremendous amount of work to do that individually.
Yeah, so that wireframe that we saw, so this is totally dependent upon the data that you have available. So a lot of our customers will have simply a product feed. And what you can do with that product feed is you would set up in, slots 4 through 8 and slots 12 through 15. We're going to pick products based upon other types of content that's being displayed there. So maybe a promotion's in the top. So then I'm going to say 4 products related to that promotion. And in the bottom section, it's just open items for you. And so what you do is you set up that wireframe, you set up that layout. Those are dynamic calls. So when you have the HTML for that, you input it into your ESP, and then that is completely reusable. So there's a variable in there that will adjust with the Jetlore setup. Every time you send out an email to a consumer, we learn what we displayed to them, what they engage with, what they didn't engage with. And so that the next time you send that out, it will vary that content. So when we saw that example of the slippers, I think there was a case where you kept being displayed the same content of the slippers over and over again. We're going to learn from that in addition to the other information that we have, diversification that we'll do, discounting for items that you did not engage with. And so we'll learn from that and display new content each time a user engages with that. So it's the one-time setup. If you have more data, so if you have, say, an RSS feed with blogs, we could say in the bottom slot, put a blog. And then every time someone opens that email, we're going to learn about what they engage with, and we'll do a new blog in the next slot. So whatever can be automated from a data perspective is automated. And then there might be, promotional banners that on a weekly basis, we have a merchandising team or a promotional team that adjusts those on a manual basis. So that's where, as I talked about, depends upon the customer, the environment, the type of data that you have available. Automate as much as you can. That wireframe can be 100% automated, or maybe, I'd say in most of our cases, it's more like 80 to 90% automated. And then there's some manual curation on that last little bit.
Excellent. On that, I'd like to ask you guys to save the date and mark your calendar for our next installment of our ongoing webinar series. We'll be talking about the challenges of flash sale commerce. Those of you that have fast moving inventory and or limited inventory, you'll understand the benefits of learning the best practices of marketing to this type of product. We're going to be joining two of Jetlore's finest, Krish Lee and Hunter Key, for this event. Of course, I will be there as your host. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at marketing@jetlore.com. Until then, we'll see you on December 13th. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you, Daves. Thank you for joining us this morning. You guys were amazing.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. And again, yeah, looking forward to engaging with any of you that have any questions. So thank you very much.